Hi, Literati, Beach and Beyond people. Sorry, we're 5 minutes late. That was my fault. We have just new protocol. Um, so excited today for our November book pick. My good friend, long time, Dani Shapiro, Signal Fires. Dani, welcome.
Ellen,
Hi,
it's
Literati book group.
it's it's so good to see you.
I know it's good to see you too. Um, so you are just, I know, because we've chatted a little bit via text, you're just off a pretty major book tour. Can you start by talking, we will get to the book, but I just want to know sort of, because I know this is the first time I believe that you've been out sort of in the public in a couple of years. What was it like? What were the high points and low points?
Mm. First of all, it was just so great to be out in the world again.
Yeah,
I felt that everywhere I went. I felt like everybody was so hungry to gather and to be together and to be in person. And that just felt amazing. I mean, as used to screens as we've gotten, there's nothing quite like being, in a room full of people. There just isn't,
correct.
you
Yeah.
know. Um, And I was in like 18 cities in 3 solid weeks. And there really weren't any low points. I mean, there were some exhausting moments, which you
Right.
know well,
I do.
but it was like all of the events were filled with wonderful readers. I mean, some high points. Okay, Nashville was a high
Okay.
point. My agent and my good friend Allison Moorer, who's a beautiful singer-songwriter, had this incredible dinner for me after my event. And you know the way those like sort of
Yeah.
after events are so celebratory, and it was like all all like the 30 of the writers and artists and songwriters and musicians from Nashville all gathered around a table, and it was really celebratory. I mean, I think there's got to be ways when you have a book come out to really celebrate that moment. No, I don't know if I'm still on. Ellen's off. I could keep talking to you guys. Um, hmm, Hi.
I hear you.
You can hear
Okay.
me.
I can hear you. Where am I? Here I am.
There you
Okay.
are. Okay.
Did I do something?
You vanished.
Okay. That was totally crazy. All right. The last thing I heard you say, Dani, was the celebratory moments. It was a celebratory moment. Your singer-songwriter friend in Nashville.
Yeah, just that I think it's so important to celebrate,
Yeah.
when we accomplish something, and books take a long time and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to write. And so there were a couple of really great moments like that. Another one was in LA, where my conversation partner was my good friend Jamie Lee Curtis.
Okay. Fabulous. Fabulous.
And
How did you meet Jamie Lee Curtis? Tell us.
I met Jamie. I got an email from Jamie when my novel Family History came out in like
Okay.
2003.
Okay.
And one day I woke up and I was checking my email in the morning, and there was an email from Jamie Lee Curtis. And I thought, like, am I on candid camera? What's going
Okay.
on?
Crazy.
And she just really loved the book, and it really moved her. And we started this email relationship. And then when I was in LA, we met, and we, over the years, just became really good friends. And I've done a few events with her over the years in different parts of the country.
Right.
And this was so special and cool too, because she's having this big moment with, with the latest Halloween
Yeah.
movie, and with, just her, it's a wonderful thing to be. I mean, she's in her 60s. I
Mhm.
just turned 60. And
How is
and
that possible?
you know,
Fabulous. Fabulous.
thank you. But to be at this point in life and have amazingly wonderful things happening, and to be trying new things, and um, different modes of storytelling, and for me to return to fiction after such a long time away from it. But also, I mean, it's just so empowering to be able to be, to feel like, you're at the beginning of something
Right.
at this point in life. It's such a
Right.
privilege and a gift.
So you hit on a lot of things that I want to talk about. So everybody here has read the book, so we don't need to give a synopsis, which I'm sure you're grateful for, although I'm sure that you have the synopsis all because you've now said it 18 times in 18 different cities. But everybody here has read the book. So um, I want to dive into the plot, but first I want to talk about something else that you just touched upon, which is your last two books before this one that I know of, and possibly more, have been memoir.
Mhm.
And you really sort of established yourself as a memoirist. I mean, a major memoirist. And I know that you teach it. And so tell me about the switch or your return, because you were writing novels and then you turned to memoir and then back to fiction. Tell me about sort of the mind process of going back to fiction.
Yeah, it was never a decision. I always kind of assumed and expected that I would go back to fiction. I wanted to go back to fiction. It's ironic to me that I became known mostly as a memoirist. I mean, there have been years recently where nobody ever knew that I had ever written fiction, even though I'd written multiple novels.
Right.
And I never chose to do that. I sort of still think of myself as an accidental memoirist, where something was leading me into writing those books and to digging in an extremely personal and autobiographical way into my own my own life as a way of exploring all of our lives.
Right. And we
But
know now, for those of you who haven't read Danny's memoirs, well, Hourglass was about your marriage, which was so beautiful. And then Inheritance, and then like the things that we talk about and that you talk about in Inheritance sort of explain in some part anyway why memoir became what you were sort of looking for in the end, right?
hugely, hugely. It was like I had been digging and digging and digging without even knowing that I was digging, and then my shovel hit, the buried treasure. I had no, and so unexpectedly, I mean, just briefly for anybody who hasn't read Inheritance, in 2016, I made the discovery through taking just a recreational DNA test for absolutely no reason other than that my husband was sending away for one and he asked me if I wanted to as well, that my dad, who raised me and who I adored and who I lost when I was 23, had not been my biological father. And that I have been obsessed with secrets all my life. I've always written about secrets. I've written about them in novels. I've written about them in memoirs. I would have told you that I came from a family that kept secrets. I mean, most families keep secrets in some way or another, but I had no idea that I was the secret, that I was like at the center. My parents kept this tremendous secret that had to do with my very identity from me all my life. And they had passed away, and I was left to kind of put the pieces together and learn what I could. And I did. It's been a tremendous journey. It's still a journey, but it's a journey that I wrote about in Inheritance. And then when I finished Inheritance, I was on the road for that book for a really long time, and people would say, "What's next?" Or,
Mhm.
"What are you working on?" And I would think, "I have no idea. I mean, haiku? I don't know. Like, what am I have finished a body of work. The body of work that began with my first memoir is now complete.
Right.
Um, I found what I was looking for, even though I didn't know what I was looking for. And so I knew that whatever I did next was going to be different. But I didn't know what it was going to be. And I had started Signal Fires 15 years earlier and had written about 100 pages of it.
Okay.
And I had put it in a drawer. Only time I've ever put a chunk of a novel in a drawer, because I couldn't figure out the storytelling. I
Right.
knew the characters, they were completely a part of my world. I had all of them, all 7 of them were crystal clear to me. I wrote a chunk of the book that took place on one night in 2010. I wrote the next chunk of the book that took place on New Year's Eve of 1999.
Mm.
And then, because I was trying to tell the story backward in time, that was my big idea. And
Right.
and because I couldn't let go of that idea and reimagine it, I ran out of runway, because when Waldo is born on New Year's Eve of 1999, if I keep on moving backward in time, then there's no more Waldo. And
Right.
that was not acceptable. There could not be no
Right.
more Waldo. And I couldn't figure out how else to tell the story because I had been so married to this idea. So I put it away. And I loved the pages I had written. I loved them probably more than I've ever loved anything I've ever written, but I couldn't figure it out. So into the drawer they went. And over the years, I kind of forgot about it, and wrote all these other books and just forgot about it. And then early in the pandemic, I was cleaning out my office closet, and behind all this other mess of stuff, there was this pile of pages. And something just said to me, reread this. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't thinking, oh, now I'm going to go back to this long abandoned novel. I sat down right here in my office where I'm talking to you on that chaise, and I reread those pages, and my mind sort of exploded because, well, two things happened. One was I liked them, and I don't usually like. I'm not in the habit of rereading 15-year-old work and thinking it's good.
Right.
And I'm, wow, this does not suck. This is, okay. But the much bigger thing that happened was I thought, and now it's 2020. And so I left Waldo at 11. Who
Right.
would he be at 21? And I've written these two sections that each take place 10 years apart. And now it's 10 years later. Who would these characters be? Who would Theo Wilf be? He has a restaurant in Brooklyn. Food is love for him. He's at the center of the first wave of COVID hitting New York City. What would he be doing? And all of a sudden, everything just like a like a Rubik's cube. Like it just like I just understood how to tell the story. And when people ask me how long it took me to write Signal Fires, I say like 15 years and a year.
Right.
Once I had it again, I mean, it didn't even take me a year once I had it again. I was
Right.
just like, there was just jet fuel, and I tore through the rest of the book.
So you're telling me that back in 2010,
11, something
11,
like, yeah.
that you had okay, because this is such the interesting thing about this novel. The secret in the Will family is this accident, which is on the first page, which is in the first pages of the book, right? So there's a fatal accident, teenagers, kids, the lighter, the sister drinking, and then the kids switch places, and their parents think that the sister was driving.
They protect them.
They protect them.
Yeah.
The intriguing thing is that in my mind, when I read that first chapter, I presumed that the novel would be about the Wilf family and the Zimmerman family,
Hmm.
family of the girl who
Hmm.
died.
Hmm.
But in fact, the Zimmerman family, it's the mother. We really don't hear from her much for the rest of the book. It becomes instead about this different family. And can you talk about that decision? Because that was a very interesting decision.
Mm. Um, well, it's so interesting how novels get made, right? I mean, how
Yeah.
they, um, the very opening pages that you're talking about, those were the first pages I wrote when I returned to
Okay.
them. So when Waldo and Ben meet each other at what Waldo calls the magic tree
Right.
in 2010, and Ben sort of winces that Waldo calls it the magic tree, and he Ben realizes, this generations and generations of kids in the neighborhood have called it that because there is something magical about it, and it's been decorated over the years, and they don't know that something tragic happened there.
Right. Okay.
So, and that was very important to me because I think that happens in places all the time where things have happened and they're sacred spots for some people, and for other people, they drive by and have no idea that anything ever happened there. But does it remain? Like, what remains? I mean,
Yeah.
I've always been fascinated by that. So that was important to me at the outset. So I knew that something had happened at that tree. I knew that it haunted Sarah and Theo. I knew that probably was a car accident, but maybe it was something else. I wasn't exactly sure what it was when I wrote those first 120 pages. I just knew that the the book itself felt like it was about the haunting or the aftermath. I mean, for Theo and for Sarah, that accident didn't just happen, it's always happening. It never
Right.
stops happening. That's what we do in our inner lives. Um, when Waldo and Ben met, to me, that was the heart and soul of the novel. And that was my like the I and what's incredibly fascinating to me is that, as I mentioned, in 2016, I discovered that I had a different biological father, right, than the
Yes.
one that I knew. So 5 years, 6 years earlier, I created the character of Benjamin Wilf.
Hmm.
Benjamin Wilf is so much like my biological father that, and as I was finishing the novel, I never once stopped and thought, "Hmm, they have the same medical specialty. They
Right.
look alike, they walk alike, they think alike, their disposition is alike." I finished the novel and I gave the manuscript to my son, who's one of my first readers, and he read the pages and he walked in my office door and he said, "Mom, he's just like him." And chills went up and down my body. And I thought, that is true. How? Why? I mean, anyone who reads Inheritance and then reads Signal Fires would think, oh, Dani must have based this character of Benjamin Wilf on her biological father. But I didn't.
Hmm.
It's like I created him all those years before.
That is crazy
Right.
town,
Crazy town. It's
honestly.
crazy town. Yeah, it is. It's, the power of the unconscious, of the collective unconscious. I mean, who knows what it is, but it's just true. But so Ben and Waldo, and the idea that we have these connections with people and we don't necessarily know why. Why do some people feel familiar? Why do you feel an instant kinship with some people? Why do you feel the opposite with some people? Why do you feel
Right.
like, danger, danger? Um, what are our, relationships to the people who pass us by in life or brush past us in an airport that might be profoundly, important, but that we might never know? These were all questions that I had that I wanted to explore. And that began with Ben and Waldo. Misty
Hmm.
Zimmerman didn't even exist in my imagination for
Right.
those 120 pages. She then, when she was the girl in the car and she's the girl who loses her life, she then becomes embedded in these in the Wilf family psyche.
Yeah.
Uh, Forever. And it's interesting too, Ellen, because I'm writing the TV pilot for
Okay.
Signal Fires. It's being developed as a TV series. And of course, in the future storytelling of this, Misty Zimmerman and her family are going to become very important. They will become,
Right.
fully fleshed out characters. But in the novel, it felt to me like this novel didn't want to be about that. It wanted to be about the aftermath.
Right.
And the way that for the Wilf family, there were no consequences that were external.
Right.
Nobody got breathalyzed.
Right.
Nobody went to jail. There was total privilege there. They were a family of standing in the community. They were white. It was 1985. Dr. Wilf was there. Nobody thought to question anything about what happened that night, which would have been a very different story today. Also,
Sure.
would have been a very different story if they were a family of a different ethnicity or of a different social standing.
Right.
Um, but there were no consequences externally. And that was something really interesting to me too, is that like there can be things that happen in life that don't show on the surface, but that are
Right.
so radical in terms of our own ways of processing them.
Right. I mean, that's really the crux of the book. And it is surprising, right? Because we're thinking, oh, somebody's going to go to jail or they're constantly looking over their shoulder, but they're not. they're really not. But the fault lines are within the family. And one of the things that I really laud you for is the way, another writer, in the hands of another writer, that story could have been very sort of predictable, where like certain thing, where the pain of that secret and the ramifications are sort of explored, they come out differently. But the subtlety and the depth with which, like, the kid Theo and Sarah and Ben, we can't really, the mother's name, is it Mimi? What is the mother's name?
Amy, yeah.
Mimi. We can't really get into her, but it's always there, but it's not obvious, and it's not overdone, and it's not overwrought, but you always know it's there. And that's really the skill of a writer. And then the Shankman family, so so interesting, especially Monsieur Shankman.
Excellent.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, can you talk a little bit about his character?
Yeah. I've never written a character anything like Schenkman. And people have also asked me, like, why didn't Schenkman have a first name? He just didn't. He just didn't. His wife called him Schenkman. I mean, everyone just called him Schenkman. It's like he was stunted in some way. Like he
Right,
just didn't. He didn't even have a first name. He didn't even deserve a first name.
right,
Um, Shankman fascinated me because, when I first started the novel, I was the mother of an 11-year-old
right,
and, someone Waldo's age. And I spent a lot of time, on the sidelines of various sporting, kid sporting events and other kinds of, kid events where parents would be there. And I would sometimes see a parent, usually a dad, who was extremely invested and agitated. Um, uh, you know, usually about a boy, but sometimes not. Sometimes a daughter. But the rage, the anger, the screaming at the coach,
yep,
and I thought about like what the psychology of that is, and it can be many different things, but with Shankman, what was moving to me about Shankman is that it's all out of love for his son. He has this special child who is brilliant and different and not normal. And all Shankman wants is for Waldo to be like all the other boys.
right,
Waldo probably also wishes he was like the other boys because that's what kids in middle school want. They want to be like everybody else. Nobody wants to, be different in middle school. I mean, I've been in front of audiences for a while now, asking an audience when we talk about Waldo, how many of you would want to go back to middle school? It's such a fun question because
right,
like no hands go up, or maybe one hand goes up and it's a total like outlier, in the front row who like for whom middle school was great. But for many of us, we wouldn't want to go back. And so for Schenkman, he really believes that the best thing for Waldo would be to have just a really normal and predictable life. And that's not going to happen for Waldo. And so he can't be a good father to his own son, and he can't get out of his own way. And so he's really kind of a tragic character because he knows that about himself, but his, his inner sort of bad wolf is just stronger than his inner good wolf, and he
yeah,
just can't do it. So for
yeah.
me, I had a lot of compassion for him as I was writing him.
Well,
I
you have to, in order for the book to work. I mean, that's the thing, is that, and that's just true of as a writer in general. Even your characters that are unlikable, you have to love them anyway. And that really came across with Schenkman. I mean, especially towards the end, but we can see it, like the way he takes away the star map, and then his like compulsive, like starting with like the compulsive dude on the rowing machine. I'm like, oh my god, like that just sets it up, right? You're like, oh my god, this guy, like we all know him, or a version of him in some way. But that's really like that. This, uh,
well, and
but he,
everything is a competition. And
right,
if everything is a competition, and if all someone does is always compare, that is a prescription for a miserable life. Somebody's always going to have more. There's going to be some aspect of life that, where you don't measure up no matter how good things are. And to me, that was Schenkman and really exploring that. I think there's a little bit of Schenkman in all of us, which is, which is what makes him, I think, a character that we can understand, even though, I mean, I was standing back as the novelist going, oh, Schenkman, stop. Get out of your own way.
Like, want the child that you have, and that's what you like. He just couldn't get there quite. All right, we're gonna run out of time, then they're gonna cut us off. So I want to ask about the title because it's such an intriguing title. Can you talk about how you chose it?
Yeah, I did not have a title for the longest time. I mean, I didn't have a title until I finished the manuscript. The file name in my computer was Magic Novel. It was not Signal Fires.
Right. Gotcha.
And I was on Twitter one day, which is not usually where you find titles.
No.
And I followed a thread of a poet friend of mine who had asked a question about works that have to do with memory and interesting ways of exploring memory. And I went down this rabbit hole, and there was this poem down that rabbit hole by Carolyn Forche, and in it was the phrase signal fires. And suddenly I thought, that's what all these characters are. That is what they all are for each other. And it's also a metaphor for, the cosmos and the stars being signal fires. And it just, as soon as I saw it, that was it. That was the right title.
I absolutely loved this book. I'm also a writer, so I can see like there were ways in which I think I appreciated it where maybe other people didn't appreciate it. But I'm going to say one thing that I really thought was amazing. Sarah is she's having a love affair, and it's like bad. But and in some sense, I mean, I thought to myself, okay, this is like one of the ways she's punishing herself ultimately, like years and years later, like she's punishing herself or what she did, because I think ultimately she feels responsible, and just for not being able to drive that night and sort of setting this whole thing in motion. But I loved that we did not get the slender part of her very bad love affair was just enough. And I felt like in another writer's hands, it would have been like a bigger, messier thing. And it was so perfectly done.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear you say that. Yeah, I'm so glad to hear you say that because I wanted to just sort of zoom in and out of these moments in these characters' lives. I mean, that's why the moving around in time ultimately was the structure that seemed like the only way to tell this story. Because if the story were told chronologically, then that affair would have had to take up more space, and that would have sunk somehow the delicate part of the story. I just wanted it to be enough.
Yeah, it was really, really elegantly, beautifully done. And I want to ask a question, and I'm sure the readers want to know too, because it switches time frames. Did you have like a map or a thread or something in your office where you had the different?
I have with other books, like with Hourglass, because it moves around a lot in time. It was like a calculus equation. With Signal Fires, maybe because I had that first 120 pages propelling me forward, and then I wrote that very first chapter, and then I knew that we would return to 2010, and when we returned to 2010, where we would be. I decided what would be the most interesting slivers of time. We never returned to 1999. That was,
one thing.
2014. I wanted to spend a little time with Waldo at age 14. And then 2020 and the couple of times that it appears, I did not want this to be a pandemic novel. But I wanted there to be this layer of 2020 where we see where these characters land in some way at this moment. So no, it unfolded in a very, I would finish a section and think, now where do we go? And
Right.
now where do we go? And then I did have the realization at a certain point that I wanted to end at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if it would work until I got there, but I wanted to end with the Will family moving into this house on Division Street at the very start of their lives together.
So good. So good. I mean, that of course just so brilliant. Okay, we have come to the end of our talk. Signal fires, Dani Shapiro. I don't know if they'll let me squeeze this in quickly, but what are you working on now?
I'm writing the TV pilot.
Oh, you're okay, you're working on this, which is great because you're still sort of immersed.
I get to hold on
Correct.
to my characters. I get
Yeah.
to and I get to expand them. I get to, I don't know, go to Argentina with Theo, or I get to, you know, be with Waldo or be with Misty and Theo and Sarah in middle school before any of this happens. I get to do all sorts of stuff.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I'm so proud of you.
Oh,
Really beautiful, wonderful, meaningful work. And I want to see it on TV for
oh,
sure.
this
Because
this
in that way you bring it like really alive, and you get to go places that you can't go in a contained.
exactly, especially in a series form.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
love
I'm
it.
and it's a new again, it's new. I've never done this before.
Yeah.
It's another mode of storytelling, so that's
Yeah.
exciting to me.
And
Um,
I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I'm 53, but it is the most exciting time of my life. I can't even tell you. And even though I am winding down and sort of looking at retirement, but the work that I'm doing now is the most exciting, because you get older and you know more, and you know, life should be a little bit different, I think, or it should have been different, because I know that in, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, women who are in their 50s and 60s were sort of, it was over.
right. No, it's such a blessing and an amazing thing, and I don't take that for granted. And I also just wanna say I don't take you for granted, and I'm so thankful to you for choosing Signal Fires. I love your work, and I adore you, and this
Thank
is just,
you.
it means so much to me.
Oh, good. All right. Thank you, Dani. Literati Beach and Beyond. Dani Shapiro. We are so lucky. All right. Have a wonderful day.
Ah, you too.
Okay. Bye. I don't even know how to get out of here. Isn't